Episode 258, Seeds, Selection, Short Seasons. This is the Change Underground for the 31st of May 2021. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Some updating info. The website disintegrated and I'm in the process of rebuilding it. Everything except the show notes is back up, I hope. So that's 275 odd sets of notes that will take some time, but I'll get them back up over the next little while. Thanks for your patience. And now to today's presentation. Seeds, little packets of life left over from the last harvest, ready to go again. The eternal loop of birth to life to death to birth to life to death, as the wheel of the year mirrors the life of the seeds, and those same seeds mirror the life of the year. And without seeds, we have no gardens as we know them. The joy of seeds is their sexual reproduction and the fact that they're a mingling of two sets of genes from their parents. Which brings us to the point of seed selection. While I go for the heirloom heritage and ancient seeds as opposed to the hybridised and definitely not the GMO types, they're all about intermingling of genes. The GMOs had potential, but unfortunately Monsanto ruined it for the seed breeding industry. So instead of rust-resistant genes from one variety being added to a more productive strain of, say, wheat, they created seeds resistance to glyphosate and Roundup, which led to the spread of Roundup and all the damage that's done to soil. And it's got to the point now where GMO means Roundup or salmon genes being added to tomatoes to make them frost resistant, Frankenfish, Frankenfoods and that sort of thing. So that now the GMOs are tainted, but they would have sped up a lot of development of seed selection if they'd been used correctly in the first place. But I'm sure that's coming with the new CRISPR gene editing techniques. It's not that new now, and all the rest of it. There are, though, still many unknowns that will stay, and the genes they create will stay in the biosphere forever, unless, of course, they turn out to be barren. Now, this happened not exactly with seeds, but seed. There was a famous Holstein Friesian bull in the States in the late 50s, early 60s, I think, that everyone across large swathes of the dairying world used for AI, that's artificial insemination, only to discover 2 years later that all of his female offspring were barren, which is not really what you want in a dairy cow. So we need to be careful when we're messing with nature, because this is the sort of thing that can happen. So no to GMOs, please. Now to hybrids. If you look at a cornfield on a commercial farm, each plant will be exactly the same height at exactly the same time. They will require the same amount of water and feeding and all the rest of it. So if you're not in irrigated land, it could be a problem. If you're not using artificial fertilisers, that could be a problem. Once you start trying to regrow the seed you've got from a hybrid plant, eventually that seed will produce the parent or grandparent varieties and you get a very mixed crop. Now some of the progenitors may have been chosen for drought resistance, not production, which means they may grow in a dry year but return very little, while the other progenitors without drought resistance simply fail to produce. So without knowing what went into your hybrid, you can't know what's going to throw back to earlier crossbreeding efforts. So that's another reason I stay clear of them. I prefer to use heirloom seeds, sometimes called heritage, but they're always open pollinated. That's because they have a wide gene spread which allows the capacity to adapt to changing weather conditions across the season, and you can save the seed and reuse it, and you'll get basically the same thing back again, throwing true to type, as they say. These seeds, though, do change a little each season. There's a little bit of adaptation that occurs genetically and evolutionarily with each growing season. Now, as the seasons at the moment appear to be all over the place a little, but still following the basic cycle, obviously, of winter, spring, summer and autumn, but they can be time-shifted at the moment, and we need our seed to be able to perform under varying conditions. What I've decided to do, and what I've been doing for years anyway because I just like the idea, is to use the shortest possible seasonal varieties I can get my hands on. This means if we get a really good summer, once the corn is off, I can put in another species like buckwheat and either harvest buckwheat or let the benefits of the extra potassium that the buckwheat seems to draw to itself stay in the system. Or I can get two different sorts of melons off different varieties of beans, one after the other. With each generation, you're adapting your seeds to your local area and the sort of season that they just went through. This is important. Now, it's unlikely you'll get more than one off in winter, but it is possible in summer, especially if we get an early spring and no late frost. The good thing about heirloom varieties is that they can be shed without fear of any legal possible actions as a result of breaking what's known as plant variety laws. Now, plant variety laws are an anathema to me, as if anyone could own life, but there you go. It seems to be more prevalent with GMOs and some hybrids, but not so many. And it's not only gardeners that save their seed for next year. Cantankerous old small area and family farmers who refused to go with the new system were also out there. Not many of them, but there was enough. There was a fella in Sweden that continued to grow the old varieties of wheat, the ones with lots of straw, and he thought it was a good variety and that the bread tasted great, and so he didn't see the need for these newfangled varieties. He saved enough seed of a few varieties over time, replanting each one to keep it fresh, until eventually contrarian bread makers arrived looking for new, in inverted commas, varieties, basically old varieties. I think it was a son or a grandson of this fella was able to provide these seeds to these new fellas, who took enough back to grow in their allotments. And once they'd grown up enough in that, they then went to field size, and then they've got enough to make bread with now. So that bread tastes like it used to a couple of 100 years ago, which is always a wonderful thing. So my personal preference, I would urge everyone to grow open-pollinated seeds. Over time, you'll make selections in your local area and invariably create new varieties in time. If you have any questions, thoughts or suggestions, I've opened a new Facebook group which survived the website crash, which is always nice. There's only a few of us in there at the moment, and I've called it imaginatively the ChangeUnderground podcast group. So search on Facebook, or there's a link in the show notes, and it'll be in the transcript, which will be the first one back up after the crash at worldorganicnews.com/episode 258. So keep away from GMOs as a general rule of thumb. Try to avoid hybridised when you can, unless you've got a particular purpose in mind, and just grow your heirlooms, your heritage varieties. Basically go for open pollinated. And you too can change the seed in your world, and change your world with your seeds. And as you're doing that, you'll be decarbonising the air, obviously, and recarbonising the soil. Thank you for listening, and we'll get the next one up fairly soon.